You've frozen up, by the way. You're no longer.
Okay, but you can hear me?
Oh yeah. And if we don't have video, we will survive. It's just always good for promotion.
Hold on, what the hell? Give me just 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay. Built-in microphone. Echo. Okay, I'm going to go out and come back in for one. Oh, you're recording?
Yeah, what I can do is just to see, but why don't you try your thing and then afterwards I'll go and check.
I just did. So go ahead and stop the recording and then I don't know if you can listen. Okay.
All right, Matt. I always start my interviews with the same question, and you will not escape me. What's a formative decision you've had to make to get to where you are today?
So mine's really a meta decision. I, about 35 years ago, made a conscious choice to always lean into yes when given an option of things. So I hadn't learned much about improvisation at the time, but I really adopted a yes and mindset. And I'll tell you, a lot of success that I've had, if you consider any of it success, has been because I have leaned in when somebody says, hey, are you interested in this? Or there's an option to do this. So the formative decision I've made is to be biased towards saying yes to opportunity.
So basically what you've just told me is that, much like me and everybody listening to us right now, you are a FOMO Sapiens.
I am indeed. I love listening to your work and being around people who think the same way.
Yeah, I agree. I think saying yes is important. I tend to do it slightly too much, but it has been. I also see the superpower of that. Now today we're going to be talking about your new book, which I have been reading. It's called Think Faster, Talk Smarter. You also have a podcast of the same name, and it's about how to speak successfully when you're put on the spot, which is something that is so important. But something when I got the book in the mail, I thought to myself, this is very clever, because it's something that we all do all the time, but we don't necessarily realize what a big issue it is and how important it is. So it's something that we all need to master. But before we get into it, and what we're going to do today, folks, is just get into this, like get practical. I do want to know, just like frame it up for us, like, you know, because I didn't think about it. It's not something but it's kind of obvious, right? Like why is this important?
So there are two whys. Fundamentally, the most significant type of communication we do is unplanned. If you have learned or trained in communication at all, it's always been around something that is planned, scripted, you create slides, you might even practice. Yet in our personal and professional lives, we're always speaking spontaneously, and no one ever takes time to really learn how to do it well. You're answering questions, you're giving feedback, you're fixing your mistakes. All of that is happening in the moment. Small talk is a big issue for many people. So the why is we're doing it all the time and we could all do better at it. For me personally, the why has two origin stories. One, my last name is Abraham, starts with A-B. I always was going first in school, elementary through high school. I was a high school teacher for 2 years a couple decades ago. High school teachers, elementary school teachers get lazy. They sit everybody alphabetically, and they always start with the person whose last name starts with A. So for my entire life, I have been speaking spontaneously, and I struggled with it for a long time. I worked on it and got better, I hope. The other part of why this is important is that the Stanford Graduate School of Business, where I teach, many of our students freeze up when they're put under that dreaded cold call from the professor. What do you think? And these amazingly brilliant minds who know the answers, they have a response, can't get it out. So the deans of the business school said, can you help us find a way? And now today, all MBA students have the choice to take this content that I put in the book to help them be better, more successful, spontaneous speakers.
That's very smart. It's interesting you say about the MBAs, because I've always done speech competitions. I have confidence.
Hey, Patrick, I'm going to interrupt you. You're breaking. The mic is breaking up again.
Fuck. Okay, hold on.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's being recorded or not, but it was doing great.
Let's. Thank you for stopping me.
Yeah.
I'll keep going. Let's see now.
You
Let
can
me
do a
move
test on
this.
it if you want. We can start over or whatever.
Okay, am I back?
You're back.
You're
You
back. You
sound
sound
more
I
hollow.
think I'm not on the right mic yet. Let me just
Yeah, yeah,
adjust the
yeah,
mic.
yeah.
yeah.
What is going on today?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I appreciate you calling that out. Thank
Oh
you.
no, I
Oh no,
I do the
I
same thing.
do the same thing.
Uh, Weird. Okay, hold on. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm gonna get out
Yep.
and come back.
Yep.
It's so weird.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm just not going to touch the table. So, but if you hear the thingy, you
I
come
will
back.
stop you again. Absolutely.
Thank you. We'll make it through. Um, so yeah, Matt. So that is a compelling answer because I recall, I've always I've done speaking competitions and things, but I was never an extemporaneous speaker. And when I did my MBA program, before I went, I was never the guy who talked at a meeting. And by the time I left, you couldn't stop me. And probably it's too much of a good thing, but it is such an important skill in the business world. You cannot outsource this kind of stuff. Now, Matt, I do want to talk a little bit about the upsides and the downsides because as I was reading the book, I was thinking about the gaffes that people make, right? So a lot of times you get put on the spot and that's when you do things, you get canceled or you say something, you misrepresent yourself. So it's not just about being sort of as an upside generator, it's also about limiting downside. Tell a little bit about that.
Well, whenever you speak, you put yourself at risk, right? Your status, your position are in jeopardy in some ways, and so that's why preparing yourself in advance. And this is the great irony of speaking spontaneously is you can actually do a lot of preparation in advance. So we need to first adjust our mindset so that we're seeing this as an opportunity, not as a threat. That will reduce our anxiety, which also gets in the way of being effective. And then we can focus on our messaging. We have so much going on in our heads in these spontaneous speaking situations that it actually makes it more difficult for us to communicate successfully. So if we can lower the temperature and volume of the distraction we can actually be more focused on our messaging, which reduces the likelihood of us actually making a gaffe or saying something we don't want to.
I hadn't thought of that, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to get everybody over the hump. But I want to start with the biggest one of all because you start the book with something I think it is the one that a lot of people get hung up on, which is fear, anxiety. When you're cold called, when you are put on the spot, you have a physical reaction a lot of times. Like I don't anymore because I just want to talk all the time and I love this kind of stuff. So I actually get all excited in a good way. But a lot of people, the fear is what drives the reaction and that paralyzes them. So let's start there. Let's start with the fear. You're cold called. How do you prepare for that moment so that you don't freeze up?
Sure. So, first and foremost, everybody needs to realize that anxiety in speaking, planned or spontaneous, is normal and natural. The vast majority of people, upwards of 75% of people, report feeling anxious in high stakes situations. And quite frankly, I think the other 25% are lying. I think we could get them to a nervous place too.
Yeah.
So when it comes to managing anxiety, and I think managing is the key word, I don't think you ever overcome it, nor do you want to. Anxiety is actually helpful. It helps you focus, it gives you energy, but you want to manage it so it doesn't manage you. And you have to take a two-pronged approach. You have to manage symptoms and sources. Symptoms are what we feel and experience. Sources are what initiate and exacerbate it. So let me give you one quick example of how to manage both symptoms and sources. Deep breathing is by far the most useful thing you can do. A deep belly breath, like if you've ever done yoga or Tai Chi, where you really fill your lower abdomen. And what's key is the exhale. All the magic happens on the exhale. So the rule of thumb, or as I like to joke, the rule of lung, is you want your exhale to be twice as long as your inhale. That takes care of your autonomic nervous system and can help reduce many of the symptoms. In terms of sources, there are many. One of the big ones is we are afraid that we will not achieve our goal. When we're speaking and communicating, we have a goal. If you're an entrepreneur, you might want to get funding. If you're a business leader, you might want to get support. If you're one of my students, you want to get a good grade. All of those are future consequences. And what makes you nervous is you're afraid you're going to have a negative future consequence. So the way to reject that is to become present oriented, be in the moment. So how do you do that? Well, you do what you and I did before we started this recording. You have a bit of chit chat, so you connect with somebody, you get present that way. Do something physical. Before this, I went for a run this morning. It got me centered and present. You can count backwards from 100 by some difficult number like 17s. That causes you really to focus. Listen to a song or a playlist. All of these get you present oriented, so you're not worried about a future consequence. So the bottom line is this: most people are nervous. You're not unusual for being nervous. Manage symptoms. Deep breathing is a great start. And think about the sources. And if it's because of the goal, the anxiety of the future, be present oriented.
We talk a lot about meditation and breathing on the show. So we've been talking about it a lot. And it is
Patrick, it's back. It's back. It's crackling is back.
Okay. I'm going to switch to my other mic.
Okay.
So stand by.
Yeah, it's like it starts for 2 minutes and then disappears.
I don't want to deal with this anymore. It's not a good use of your time or mine.
No,
and
I
have all my stuff right here. So let me just do this.
Okay, no worries. Get it plugged in.
Now, do you record your show on video or no?
We do not record the video
that's awesome.
just because I don't know what kind of team you have. It's me and this one person who's 10% time and a consultant. So we just don't. I'd love to do video. We just don't have anybody to do anything with it. If we got
I'll tell you, I'm gonna fix all your problems on this front if you want to do that, because I have the solution.
Yes.
For that, but let me first.
Yes.
Turn on my mic. Let me capture that back. Thank God I have a backup. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah. No, it's always good to have that.
I'm gonna look a little bit like Whitney Houston over here because I'm gonna be holding a mic, but
That's all right. I find it interesting that of all the people you could have chosen, you chose Whitney Houston. But okay.
I don't know why. I think of mics.
No, it's fine. That's all right.
Yeah, it was a weird place to go, but I'm a risk taker.
Well, hey.
Testing 1 2 3. Testing.
You're not on. You're not on. It's still fuzzy.
Yeah, hold on a second. We're not there quite yet.
So
we're good.
My question, boy, this is fun. I never had this. You really think you must think I'm a real pro?
No. Hey, well, I have had these problems, so I totally know.
I know, it's so funny. All right. So we talk a lot about breathing on the show, and I love that you went there, because it is true. The more that you do these things, and talking about building up resiliency and skills, the more that you do these things, breathing, you can just go back to it pretty quickly. And so I can understand how kind of remembering that one way to respond to this stuff is to rely on your breathing and focusing on that moment can be very powerful. So all this is just highly practical stuff. What I want to do now is, because I know folks listening are folks that network, are folks that pitch, are folks that negotiate. Let's talk about you. One thing you do that's really nice in the book is the upfront is about sort of the theory, but then you have situation specific advice for folks. So let's get into that. I want to start with the one that I actually laughed out loud when I saw this one, which is the small talk one, because small talk it gets a bad rap, but you're right. It's the icebreaker, right? And so it's something that we should learn how to do. And the great news is once you learn how to do it, you can just use the same tricks over and over again. But what advice do you have for us in terms of mastering small talk?
So, as in the whole book, it's really about mindset and messaging. So let me approach it in both ways for small talk. As you said, many of us see small talk as a necessary evil. It's a challenge. It's something that we really have to do but don't like doing. And I'd like people to just think through the value that small talk has. Not only does it allow to break the ice, as you said, it allows you to find connection points. You and I, before we started this, had a bit of chit chat, and we found at least three areas of connection that we didn't know existed, and some of that might lead to something in the future. So, it's an opportunity to connect, to collaborate. So, if you change perspective on it, it makes it a little easier, and maybe something people get excited about. The other thing we have to reframe is many of us see small talk as a tennis match where I have to say something interesting and throw it across the net. And then maybe you'll pick it up, maybe you won't. But the goal is just, I got to get something across the net. And I'd like people to re-envision, and Patrick, I don't know if you growing up did this, but I played a lot of hacky sack. I like the hacky sack analogy where the goal is to just keep the ball off the ground, right? It's not to score a point or just get it across the net. It's to collaborate with somebody. And if that's the case, then that leads into the messaging. And the messaging is get other people talking. Ask questions. I am a huge fan of structure. I think one of the key ways to succeed in spontaneous speaking is to leverage structure. And that sounds weird because structure sounds antithetical to spontaneity, but in fact, structure enables spontaneity. So I have a favorite structure. It's three questions. What? So what? Now what? And you can do so many things with this if you just answer those questions. But in small talk, just asking those questions is enough. So imagine you and I are at some kind of industry conference. We don't know each other. I can come up to you and I can say, "Hey, Patrick, what excites you about being here?" And you might share something, and I say, "Oh, really? Why is that so important to you?" And you might answer, and then I'd say, "Oh, what are you going to do next? What are the?" So all I've done is ask you what, so what, and now what, and that gets us talking. So these open questions, leveraging this structure, can help. The last thing I'll share with you is a colleague of mine, her name is Rachel Greenwald, said something to me that I think is just the mantra of small talk. Your goal in small talk is to be interested, not interesting. And so if you focus on getting others to talk and really being inquisitive and curious, you can be incredibly successful in chit chat and small talk.
And it's a great way to avoid the dreaded, "Oh, so what do you do for a living?" which is just it's lazy. Like if
Yeah,
that's
oh,
where you're
absolutely.
going, nobody says like, "Wow, what a sparkling conversationalist," after somebody asks that question. I really avoid it. I used to be that guy I asked, but I totally agree with you because at the end of the day, the star of that conversation isn't you. It should be the person you're talking with. If you, in your communication in life, remember that one thing, that making somebody else feel like the star or making them the star is going to open doors, you will be tremendously advantaged.
100% agree. Well put.
All right. So we've now figured out small talk. Let's talk about pitching. I mean, you're a professor at Stanford. So this is like top of mind for all your students who are pitching in Silicon Valley. Talk about how you get people to make more compelling pitches.
Yeah. So, first and foremost, the most important thing of any pitch, and I would argue any communication, is to really understand your audience and the people you are pitching to. It is so easy for us to just get locked into what we think is important. You really have to spend time understanding your audience and their needs. Absolutely critical. Step number one. Now, when it comes to actually structuring the pitch, I have a favorite structure for a real quick pitch. So let me introduce it to you. It is 4 sentence starters. All you have to do is finish these 4 sentences, and I believe you will have a compelling, very clear elevator pitch. So the sentence prompts are, what if you could, so that, for example, and that's not all. If you finish each of those, you will have a very successful pitch. Let me give you an example. As you mentioned, I have a new book coming out. It's called Think Faster, Talk Smarter. Here's how I pitch the book. What if you could feel more comfortable and confident speaking in spontaneous speaking situations? so that you can come off as credible, sharp, and on point. For example, if you're doing a job interview, pitching a product, going to a convention where you have to do small talk, you can leverage these skills to be more effective. And that's not all. By mastering these techniques, you will actually set an example and be seen as a more credible and competent individual. Do you see how all I did was finish those 4 sentences and I have a compelling pitch? So it's what if you could, so that, for example, and that's not all.
And I love and that's not all, because what it does from a psychological standpoint is it's like it opens the door to all the other possibilities, right?
So Patrick, you're going to kill me. The static started again.
The static is back.
It is back.
I think it's on
Maybe
your
it's
side.
me. Maybe it's, I mean, could it be
I think
me?
it's on your side.
Okay.
But I'm worried about our next recording. But I have to. I feel confident that it is not on this side.
Okay, that's fine. Great. Sorry.
No.
It comes in and I'm not touching anything and I don't hear it with me.
That
So
is
anyway.
so weird.
Yeah, and it goes away when you check. Anyway, let's just keep going, and if we need to re-record something, we can do it later.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just worried about your show now, though. Well, we'll have your guy there, I guess, right?
Yeah, my guy hopefully will know what the hell he's doing. Neil's a good guy. So all right.
Okay,
let's keep
we'll
going.
figure it out. But let me pick that up. What I really like about this is and that's not all. I mean, all of it is good, by the way, and I'll be using that, because you take those 4 prompts, you fill them out, and anything you want to pitch, anything you can pitch. I mean, it is pretty remarkable. I love that. But I love and that's not all, because that's the thing to remind people about the sense of opportunity that lies in, beyond the fields, in the distance in the horizon. So from a psychological perspective, you're not boxing yourself into a closed pitch. It's an open-ended pitch. Pretty magical. So I want to know, how did you figure that out?
So this was out of necessity, actually. So one of the things that I do at Stanford is I do a lot of teaching, both of my MBA students, but also other executives and firms that come to the campus. And I was involved in a program that had 25 small companies that were there to learn how to run and grow a business. And I was coaching each company, and I had 30 minutes with each company. And I was finding that it was taking forever for me to learn what the company did. We were spending half of our time with them explaining it. And I said, okay, we got to cut to the chase. What if you could? So I came up with these prompts out of necessity, and then over the years have been honing them to the point where I think they actually really, really work.
I want to put it on a pillow. I do. Great. Because I don't want to forget that. I think this is probably I am not pulling your chain here. I think this is one of the most valuable things we've ever said on the show.
Oh, wow.
What if you could, so that the third one is, for example, and then you do and that's not all.
Yes.
If everybody, I just want to people should stop their cars right now if you're driving and just ruminate on this, because I'm going to use this this is so good. I'm going to credit you, Matt, but I'm going to be using this from now on. All right, so let's keep going, and that's not all. There is more in this interview.
Exactly.
Let's talk a little bit about the apology, because I just heard a news report on NPR, and there were these 2 women who had written a book about apologies, and the reality is most apologies, especially these days, people don't actually give an apology. Oh, I'm sorry if you felt upset by what I did. That's not an apology, by the way. That is, you're putting it back on the victim of your misdeeds, right? So apologies are really important, and there's just a basic skill to being a good human being, but most people don't do them well. How do we extemporaneously figure out how to apologize when we do something? Because you say something, you do something, the face turns red, you're freaking out, and you don't know how to navigate, but that moment is so critical. What is your advice?
So you're exactly right with apologies. One, they happen in the moment, and they are best delivered, or the need to apologize happens instantly, and you need to respond, if you can, as quickly as possible to really mitigate long-term consequences. And again, We have to see an apology not about us. It's about the other person and helping the other person to work through the offense that we brought upon them. So, as with everything in my book, it's all about mindset and it's about messaging. And I have a structure that can be really helpful when you are addressing an apology situation. And I call it AAA. You told everybody to stop their cars. I hope they got back to their driving, but AAA, it's acknowledge, appreciate, amends. So first and foremost, you acknowledge what it is that you did that was offensive, and you take responsibility for it. So you name it. So it might be, I'm sorry that I mispronounced your name, or I'm sorry that I continually interrupted you in the meeting. So you acknowledge it. You then you appreciate publicly the impact that the offense had. So you might say, when I interrupt you, I know that I understand or appreciate how that might make you feel devalued or how I undercut your credibility. So you put yourself in the other person's perspective and acknowledge that. And then finally is amends. And in amends, you detail or explain what you'll do to change this behavior in the future. So, for example, I might say, in the future, beyond not interrupting you, I'll be sure to paraphrase what you said before I add my contribution. So you acknowledge, you appreciate the consequences or impact, and then finally you express what it is you'll change, and that's amends. So acknowledge, appreciate, make amends.
And that's not all. No, just kidding. That is all for that one. But I love that. And I think, you talk in the book about listening, that sometimes the best talking we can do is listening. I guess and that's not all would be, I would say, and then, listen and hear make sure that your message was received.
Absolutely. So listening I've been doing this for over 25, 30 years. And I'll tell you, the most important part of communication is listening. It allows you to put yourself in the other person's perspective. In the case of spontaneous speaking, it allows you to cue into nuance because we can make mistakes. Imagine this, Patrick. We come out of a meeting, and at the end of the meeting, you look at me and you say, Matt, how did that go? I immediately hear he wants feedback. So I'm going to give you feedback. And so I might say a couple things you did well, and I might dive deep into the things you could have done better. I might say, you didn't spend enough time on this. You ignored somebody's interest. And all of a sudden I'm piling on this feedback that I think is helping you so you can be better. But had I really listened, I might have noticed, hey, when Patrick said that, he didn't have the normal energy in his voice. He went out the back door, not the front door, before he met up with me. Maybe had I listened better, I would have realized you weren't really asking for feedback. In that moment, you were asking for support. You wanted somebody to put their arm around you and say, hey, that went okay because you're not feeling good about it. But I totally missed that because I did not listen well.
It's the 3 H's too. I mean, it's just this thing that I read somewhere and I've been saying to people, because I used to be the guy, this is a new discovery of my life. I'm the guy who always wants to solve your problems. You tell me something and I'm like trying to give you all this advice. People want one of three things. They want to be heard, hugged, or helped. If somebody is looking for the hug and you're trying to help them, it can be very off-putting. And so looking for the nonverbal cues as well as the verbal cues and listening, it is a superpower that a lot of us don't exercise, including myself. So I'm working on that. Now, you hit the feedback point, which is good because I was going to ask you about that. I do want to ask you a couple more questions that are kind of like, I would say like kind of the tools of mastery. And one of them is vocal fillers. Matt, we all have these tics that we have. Everybody, even very accomplished people, you'll hear them speak and you'll be like, boy, that's irritating. How do we... I do these laughs after everything, which I think are really endearing, but some of you probably hate. Anyway, what is the secret to getting rid of the ums and the ahs and those kind of annoying things that hold us back?
Well, it's like, no, I'm joking. What I love about you, Patrick, is you're very self-reflective, and that's important because getting rid of these verbal tics, verbal graffiti, takes reflection. Now, for me, it's all about reframing and mindset issues first. I had on my podcast a linguist. Her name is Valerie Friedland. And I posed almost the identical question you just asked me, and she convinced me that filler words actually serve a purpose. There are multiple purposes, in fact. So I've changed my thinking on these. The goal is not to eliminate them. The goal is to minimize them so they are not distracting. Having that reframe helps put it into perspective and take some of the pressure off. The filler words that bother us the most are the ones that come between our sentences and our ideas. So if I say some as I'm speaking, that's less bothersome than when I stop and then start again, because it just sits there. You can eliminate some of those by managing breath. If you train yourself to end your sentences or phrases completely out of breath, you must inhale in order to speak again. Speaking is an exit-only event. You have to be breathing out to speak. You cannot inhale and speak at the same time. So if I train myself to land my phrases out of breath, I must inhale before I can speak again, which does two things. It eliminates filler words. It eliminates any words and builds a pause. So not only do you get the benefit of fewer fillers, you get the benefit of adding a pause, which is very helpful in communication. So how do you practice this? I challenge every one of your listeners, the next time they look at their calendar, diary, schedule, whatever you call it, speak out loud the next 5 things you're supposed to do on your schedule. Make sure there's more than one word. So I wouldn't just say lunch. I would say lunch with Patrick at Chez Panisse. But every time I finish those phrases, land it. That is, be out of breath, and then start the next one. And if you do that drill 3 or 4 days in a row, you will reduce your filler words almost, I can guarantee it.
That's very cool. By the way, Chez Panisse sounds expensive. I hope you're paying.
It's a very fancy restaurant out here on the West Coast. So yeah, it is expensive.
Okay, good. We'll hit it up.
It's your treat, not mine.
Oh, no. Okay. That's a good thing to practice. I mean, what I love about this is that so many of these things, again, you can practice them. If you want to do this, this is your manual. It's highly practical, which I always appreciate. And it's also, it's something that you can apply to many parts of your life. So there's a lot of value to just learning this stuff. And what's cool, I was telling Matt before we started the interview, he has these QR codes in the book, what will take you to his website, mattabrahams.com, where you can practice all this stuff and get resources. So it's very cool. Now I want to end up on one last question. And this is one, so both of us have podcasts, Think Faster, Talk Smarter. We have FOMO Sapiens. One thing that blows my mind is when people write a book, they have a physiological change in their body that makes them just talk a lot longer. So they used to give a 1-minute answer. Now they give a 43-minute answer. I have had people on my show, and I love all my guests, don't get me wrong. But I have people on my show, somebody give a 13-minute answer one time. And I actually stopped and I said to the person who I deeply love, I said, nobody wants 13 minutes. I'm sorry. You can't do that. And then I had to actually go back and edit it and insert me going well, that's interesting, or asking a question, or cut it out or whatever. It's deeply painful. Now, that being said, I just talked for I don't know how long about the fact that people talk for too long. How do we know, right? I mean, geez, how do we know if it's too much? What's an appropriate amount? How do we learn that? Because that is probably an area where I could benefit from some training.
Absolutely. Concision is key, especially in this day and age. I believe attention is the most precious commodity we have, and people blow it by just talking too much. Now, part of it in spontaneous speaking is we're discovering what we want to say as we're saying it. So we end up saying more than we need to. So we have to work on concision. My mother has this saying, by the way, that I love, and I know she didn't come up with it, but I try to live my life by it. Tell the time, don't build the clock. And many of us are clock builders, right? And so here's how I work to be more concise. And you can be the judge, as can your listeners, if I'm concise. Before I answer a question, before I give feedback, I say to myself, the bottom line is. So I fixate on what is the critical element I'm trying to get across. And then I start from there by thinking about what's the most important things I can say to get that point across in the least amount of words. So that becomes my training. And how do you practice this? listen to your podcast. Have all of your listeners listen into Patrick's podcast or the previous ones. Listen into my podcast, Think Fast, Talk Smart. Pause it. Rephrase what you just heard in a really pithy, short way to train yourself to prioritize the most important thing. So you have to drill it. If you don't practice being concise, you will not be concise.
I'm not going to respond in a long-winded fashion, but I will say that I agree with you, and I think it's something that we should all practice. Concision is power, right? Less is more.
Yeah.
All right, so if you like what you heard, you can get a heck lot more of it in the new book out now, Think Faster, Talk Smarter. You can also go check out Matt's wonderful podcast, which I will be a guest on. So we're going to talk about a lot of stuff over there. So if you want more of the two of our voices, you know where to find us. The podcast is called Think Fast, Talk Smart. And if you want to check out Matt's work and learn more about him, you can go to his website, mattabrahams.com. Matt Abrahams, I just loved having you here. You come back anytime, and thanks so much for being here.
Patrick, thank you so much. The work you do is fascinating, and I hope that people continue to use you as a way to learn more important things.
Thank you.
Too. And I'm sorry I started doing hand gestures.
No.
There was somebody doing work on our house, and he was trying to tell me he needed to talk to me, so I'm trying to signal talk to my wife.
No,
so that's
dude.
why I'm doing this shit.
You and I are having like a weird day together, and
We
that's
are.
okay.
Yeah, I think we both need a glass of wine at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let me do the sending again.
Okay.
Matt Abrahams, thank you so much for being here.
Patrick, thank you. It was a true pleasure. Your work is fantastic. I look forward to continuing the conversation.